ordinance for the board or committee members to consider, and it has 11 bullet points. Any of you have any comments or?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Number 11, I question whether that's consistent with other policies with respect to council or NMC also representing trustees in some areas. I suspect there is an inconsistency that needs to be dealt with in some way.
I would agree. I would like to know if there are any other entities within the organization, administration, faculty, staff, who have to give an indemnification clause to do their work. It strikes me as incongruous that the unpaid, uncompensated people should be hung out with no protection. So I personally would not be comfortable signing an agreement with that clause in there. So is that the only one, Kennard?
Yes.
Susan, did you have any comments on any of those provisions? Okay. Moving on to the other document that we were given, which starts out with a resolution language. How about if we deal with that part first? Any comments from any of the committee members about the resolution portion of that document? Is it necessary? I mean, do most of our policies contain resolution language? I found it superfluous myself.
Well, I don't know that it adds anything. I don't know that it detracts either. It so it doesn't really bother me.
So if it weren't there, it wouldn't bother you?
If it weren't there, it wouldn't bother me.
Susan?
I don't think it does
just
anything.
strikes me as out of character with, there isn't another policy that we have that has defining language about why we're doing it. We're doing it because it's what we've chosen to do. So again, we will present these, if we agree as a committee, we will present these going forward in a marked up manner, okay? And so if I'm hearing you all correctly, you would agree that we mark it up by removing the resolution language. So moving on to the proposed policy, obviously it starts with defining some terms. Any questions about the definitions?
Sure, the only thing I wanted to note is that as we define electronic communication, and then throughout the document, it goes back and falls back on email, and I thought it was confusing that it doesn't always talk about text messages, and it seemed like it would be easy to clear up just by being consistent through the document and just calling it electronic communication. And as I was looking ahead to page, on the second page where it said email subject to Freedom of Information Act, and again reading that, it doesn't mention text. I just found that a little inconsistent.
Help me out here. I mean, my sense would be that electronic communication could also include a telephone, because that's an electronic device.
Well, it says except voice communications.
I'm sorry?
It says in the definition it does not apply to voice communication. But I think it would, by this definition, include text and faxes as well.
But then it just says email, 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 and I just think that we should just change the language to just say electronic.
Use the defined term. Yeah, that's better drafting, I agree.
So wherever we're seeing email, like in the headings, we're going to substitute electronic communication.
Right.
Okay, that's a good tip. Others? At least initially? Okay. Nothing on that first page? Any comments? Okay, let's go to the second page. Again, I guess I would simply comment that my sense of this policy is that it's extremely, it's much more than a policy. It feels a lot like procedure as opposed to policy. And generally, the board is responsible for policy, and then we look to the administration for procedure and implementation. So that's a concern that I have about this document, and I think I would be comfortable asking the administration to maybe look at pulling out, after our conversation today, the policy elements of this as opposed to the procedural elements of this. It would strike strike me that this policy could probably be encapsulated in 1 or 2 paragraphs, as opposed to all of this detail of, how you're gonna do it and who's gonna do it.
And by getting so detailed, I think it has erred in the middle sentence in the 3rd paragraph from the bottom of the 2nd page, beginning with however. First of all, I don't think there's anything wrong with replying to the entire board when you just say, I'm coming to the meeting. I don't think that's a violation of the meeting act. Secondly, this says should not reply to more than a quorum, it should say should not reply to a quorum.
Right,
So just take that sentence out, I'd say.
right. Do you see the paragraph we're talking about? 3rd paragraph up from the bottom.
Oh, okay.
Where it starts with however, that's.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and again, these are the kinds of details that, I would instruct administration, once we've arrived at a consensus of what we think a policy should look like, to go back and come up with a policy, and then obviously we're gonna wanna sign off on the procedures because we're the ones that are gonna have to implement them, but I don't think they need to be a part of the policy. Okay, so anything else on that 2nd page that anybody wants to point out, Susan? Bernard?
Not on that page, no.
Well, I guess at the bottom of the page, it gets into the discussion about emailing during board meetings or
Yeah, I was a
committee.
little confused
And
about
it
that too.
just didn't seem necessary to me.
I mean, are you talking about us emailing each other during the course of a meeting?
I'm not aware anybody's ever done that.
Nor am I.
It is specifically in the Holly's manual, it talks about that specifically, so I think that's why it was drawn out.
Okay,
But
and you may put it in a procedure, I
Yes.
definitely do not want to see it in a policy.
Right.
I mean, again, it's, yeah.
It just surprised me because it didn't seem relevant at all, so.
I do think that one of the things that I thought was sort of helpful to us, because we sometimes have members who aren't able to attend, it sounds as though we would be able to accept their comments at a meeting. At least as I was reading through this, how we sort of took some heed for Bob having his thoughts shared during a meeting. And
I think you can, they just can't vote.
right, but the
Yeah.
point, that's not the point. The point
No.
is, we want to know how members think about the issues, and we want people to know how members think about the issues. So if they would be able to communicate through text or email to the group as a whole in the course of a meeting or a committee meeting, I think that that would be helpful.
And I think they can.
And you mean if it were actually made known during the meeting?
Well, the last page, it says, email sent and received by a member during a public meeting shall be included in the minutes of such meetings.
During the meeting?
So,
yeah.
right, exactly.
Sure.
So if somebody had to be out of country or out of state and they wanted to weigh in on an issue, they could at least let us know how they felt about that issue, and it would be part of the record. You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. I question it because we don't do verbatim minutes.
I know that.
Why would you put a whole email in the
Well,
minutes?
we
Other
do,
than referring
we
things.
do verbatim minutes now.
Not official though.
Well, they may not be official, but they are part of the public record for, I believe our policy is a year, so.
So to include it that way because we wouldn't be there to say it in person.
Well, and I think you could say, as chair or whomever, I received an email from Bob Brick, he's out of the country, he wanted to weigh in on this particular issue, I'm going to read you the email that Bob, said.
Well, if it's disclosed during
Oh,
the meeting,
right,
Right,
that complies with the intent of that.
exactly.
yes,
Why
That's
would
what I'm
anybody
saying.
complain?
Right.
yes.
Okay, then the last paragraph of the proposed policy, I have an issue with, I don't know if anyone else
I
has.
do too.
What's your issue?
I don't think this policy is so difficult you need training on it. I think you ought to say you've read it and you understand it, and if you don't, ask questions. But to require somebody to sit down in a room and be trained on a policy that is as easy to understand as this is, I think, or will be when we get through with it.
Well, I think the implication that as professionals and highly educated people, that we would need some annual refresher course on this is a bit much. This is not that that complicated.
I'm
so.
not opposed to having training made available to
Sure,
any trustee who would be interested,
sure.
but I would agree that it wouldn't be required.
And would you see that as part of a procedure?
Procedure.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so let's take a minute and look this over again, make sure that we've hit the high points.
Well, we're sending it back to be reworked.
Yes, I just want to make sure we haven't missed any points that
Anything that should be looked at.
anyone may have wanted to make sure was reconsidered. And, you know, in the process of coming up with a new policy, one that would be succinct, you know, as part of that policy, I think by Susan's suggestion, that it would be annually reviewed by the board. I think any policy that implicitly requires agreement would be contrary to our individual responsibility as trustees. In other words, I'm not going to bind some future board and say, you must agree to this. I mean, obviously you need to review these things, and if you disagree, you need to disagree. But to say, you know, to imply that, or mandate that, you know, you're going to review this policy and you will agree with it, you shall agree with it, you shall accept it, I don't think we
So
can do
you're
that.
speaking to the whole agreement, not just paragraph 11.
Exactly, exactly.
I agree.
You know, when we put together a new policy, it should be reviewed annually by the board, just like all of our policies, and the ones that we determine need to be reviewed annually, but I don't think that we can compel people to agree with any policy.
Well, policies are to be obeyed by the board unless somebody disagrees and brings it to the board.
Right,
That's the way to handle it.
right. Okay. So, yeah, please.
Can you all, again, look at the three definitions there and
Yep.
tell me whether or not those appear to be clear enough, or? The second and third to me are, I mean, it's hard for me to distinguish what the difference is on the first page.
Mhm. It's legal speak.
Could be the reason it's for me.
You know, I think he's putting in communication and the communication of value because it's probably language taken from a legal opinion of some court. So I think for our purposes, what do you think, Kennard? Do we need both of those?
Probably you could combine the two thoughts into one. In essence, get rid of the second one, the official communication of value.
And maybe after correspondence, comma, and then just go, that is required for ongoing blah, 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 blah. So take the second one and
Yeah.
knock off official college communication of value means an email sent or received. Remove that and then bring the rest of that sentence up with a comment after correspondence in the first one. So official college communication means communication that is in furtherance of an official function of the college and includes but is not limited to emergency notifications, educational dialogue, research, and general college business correspondence. That is required for ongoing legal, fiscal, administrative, operational, or research purposes.
Okay,
Sounds good?
okay.
And the first definition is sufficiently vague to include something new that's invented that we don't even know about yet.
As far as electronic communication?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What other questions following our conversation would you have about what we might be looking at as far as a rewrite? as far as the agreement for use of the email system, again, I would ask our faculty, staff, administration, et cetera, they all sign something similar to
When
this?
they go through,
We
when they
just signed
first,
something.
are employees, they have to,
Could you provide us with a copy of their
Yes.
policy?
yeah.
Or their agreement for
Yeah.
use? I think that would be helpful.
And just my comment is that on any redraft, I'd like to see that run by Smith Foley again,
Of what?
of the policy. If we're gonna rewrite the policy, I'd like them to take another look at it when it's done.
They might be doing the rewrite.
Maybe they'll do the rewrite, that's fine. Just so they have their hand on it.
Other questions from you all? No? Okay.
Well, I'm looking at item two and three, in particular three.
Where, under what?
Excuse me, I'm back on agreement.
Okay. Items 2 and 3 on the agreement?
Yeah, particularly three. I guess that's just limited to candidates, not to laws and things like that, where it is part of my and our job to tell legislators whether we're opposed, in favor, or have issues with certain things that are being.
Yeah.
But, for example, the ballot proposition, that House Joint Resolution M would fall under that category, and part of my job is to inform the legislature about the implications of those types of things as they're crafting them. And so if we extend that to you, which I've asked you to have conversations with legislators, this would prohibit you from doing that, at least electronically, which I don't think is.
Why don't you see if we can get that language clarified? I'm sure it's for purposes of, like millage elections or things like that. I mean, obviously, one of our jobs is to try to use our position to help our legislators get us the help we need, so.
I guess I interpret purpose related to board or committee membership more broadly, to include anything that is part of serving on the board, which would include, I think, communicating with legislators.
But then when you read 3, it says that you
Yeah.
can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
ballot propositions or express an opinion on a
Oh,
candidate.
3 is
Yeah.
a good point.
Yeah.
The two
And
together.
that's my
I
concern.
take that right
It
out.
needs a little more.
I'm still in favor of
Getting rid of
dropping the
this.
whole agreement.
That's
So
just what I was gonna clarify, because in the notes, I just put that you
The agreement for use?
said that you wanted to drop the agreement altogether.
And then we questioned if other areas.
I'll make a motion.
That was a mistake in your notes.
Okay.
I don't recall us saying that at all. We wanted to drop number 11, drop number 11.
But I
and then-
did ask you once if you were commenting on the agreement as a whole.
You did, yeah,
And you said yes,
yeah.
so I took that to mean.
I'm
you
sorry.
We
thought-
thought that, so, but that, I'm glad I clarified.
No, number 11. And then we
Okay.
want to make sure, we want to see what the other members of the institution have as far as an agreement for use.
Okay.
All right.
Okay? Okay, so then, other items for discussion. What other items did any of you committee members have that you wanted to bring up? Kenard, did you have anything?
I do not.
Did you all have anything you wanted to update us on, bring our attention
these the policies that you suggest that we start to look at? I know that we suggested some of these just because it's been a period of time.
I think those suggestions are fine with the understanding that, I'm gonna encourage board members to review all of the policies, and that if any of them are struck by, we're gonna have some board members coming on board here pretty soon, presumably. And, obviously, that would be a wonderful opportunity at that time to look at. I'm not sure that we're going to have any board members, but we do have an election coming up. So in the event that we get a new board member, that's a good time to review our policies with the new member. Okay, nothing else? We're adjourned, thanks. So you'll get back with us with a revised policy, and we'll just report to the committee or to the board as a whole